Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Beyond Second Cognition. I'm Endall Beall. The topic of this discussion is Intellect, Consciousness, and the Great Awakening. If you look at what science is investigating, consciousness has been a dirty word to them for a long time in reference to as the C word, because they cannot find the origin of consciousness. The standard working theory for years has been that consciousness arises from intellect, which is not true. But this is how their intellect convinces them that consciousness arises from intellect by studying neuroscience and brain waves and all these other things. They have figured out how the human biocomputer works from a mechanical standpoint, but they can't pinpoint consciousness for the very simple reason that consciousness does not originate with the brain or with the intellect. It is an external force of awareness. A lot of people call this spirit. I've gone into great detail in my books, Gutting Mysticism and The Truth About the Divine Soul, to show that what people presumed as consciousness before, or spirit, was in fact a mind virus that mimicked our intellect. And I'm not going to go into that in this discussion. But consciousness does not arrive from intellect. As I put in my last podcast, intellect is a processing machine. It operates off a binary system of choosing yes or no answers when we are presented with choices. Now, we may have multiple choices in any given circumstance in our life to choose from, but it always boils down to this choice or that choice. Thus, the human intellect in the human biocomputer is nothing but a binary computer. It's a flesh-manufactured AI. While science and technologists are breaking their neck to create mechanical AI, we've got the most sophisticated AI in existence in the human brain. And the intellect is the processing unit. I discuss this in Consciousness Evolves and Intellect Doesn't. It gets discussed somewhat more in my soon-to-be-released Voodoo Reality book, which hopefully will be ready for purchase around next week or so. And it will be discussed in greater depth in The Flesh Robot when it gets released. I'm not going to put a forecast on that because that's going to require a lot of explanations. But all these folks are wrapped up in this Great Awakening circumstance put out by Q. I'm going to ask each one of you involved in this Great Awakening, what do you think you're awakening to, and where do you think it's going to go? Do you think it's going to stop with just exposing tyranny and arresting tyrants and throwing them in jail and perhaps hanging some of them for treason or whatever? Or have you considered the possibility there is more beyond that, and that this Great Awakening is an evolution in human consciousness and human awareness, a way for the human biocomputer to stop playing narrative games concocted by others? What I'm going to point out to all of you is that in the film The Matrix, it was a metaphor for reality. In that film, the metaphor was that people were locked into a machine-generated virtual reality. The fact of the matter is, we live in a virtual reality, ladies and gentlemen. We live in a world driven by hearsay. Virtually everything you know or think you know was told to you by somebody else. You don't have any direct experience of it, in most cases. You just take the narrative. Somebody writes a book, calls it the Bible, and says, God said this. You're taking their word for it. And there were a lot of authors involved in that book, by the way. The same with the Quran. So humans write these things, and they concoct these narratives, and they get a bunch of other people to believe these narratives, and then you create a consensus perceptual reality. There's no foundation in fact on it. It's just hearsay. But when you get enough of these people that get together that agree with the hearsay story, I like that story, I believe that story, then they go out there and start either trying to convert people to the story, or they kill them. Look at human history. Our history is riddled with it. And I discuss this in the Voodoo Reality book. So what are you awakening from? You're awakening from an illusion. And what is the illusion? It is a perceptual illusion based on stories told to you by other people who write the stories. Simple as that. There's not a thing when you ask yourself, why do I believe what I believe, that you're not going to discover because somebody said so. And so your whole perception of reality is predicated on somebody else's say-so and no direct knowledge from experience on your own. That's very disturbing. It is to me. And so this is what people are awakening from. They're awakening from an illusion. They're being red-pilled, as the Matrix called it. And the more you dig, the more you find out how much your world is nothing but a perceptual illusion. What you think is reality is not reality. And it doesn't matter what you believe. You know, your political ideologies were concocted by somebody. Your social issues were concocted by somebody. And then when a bunch of people line up behind them to create consensus reality, we get forced into doing it because the crowd says so or the herd says so. While people scream about being independent individuals, they're not really. They're only individuals within a herd construct of a perceptual reality, a consensus reality founded upon somebody's narrative. And so you're living a world of stories, ladies and gentlemen. The stories have been whitewashed, tampered with, sanitized to give you a brief overview of your traditions, your culture, your history, and you're taking their word for it without doing a lot of digging on your own. Those who do the digging, however, find out that the illusion is really pervasive. So the evolution of consciousness is part of the Great Awakening. And where it's going is humanity to shed this illusionary world we call first cognition, to move into a new parameter of humans functioning at a higher level with more awareness and holding people accountable for their own actions through personal responsibility. You will see this emphasized in the Q posts, you will see it emphasized in my work, and you will see it emphasized in other work. But the main thing that I want everyone to ponder at this point in time is how much of what you think you believe was not told to you by somebody else. How many conclusions did you reach on your own without some narrative or the pressure of the crowd or your peer group defining what you should believe? When you start pondering that, ladies and gentlemen, then the illusion starts to reveal. For those of you doing the work, stay the course. Don't give up on yourselves.